What's going on, everybody? It's Mike from Mana Hoarders. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome, and for those of you who are returning, welcome back. If you're like me, you enjoy playing Commander, but you also like saving money. That's why I built Felothar, Dawn of the Abzan as my next Abzan commander for around 20 bucks. You can cast Felothar for a white, a black, and a green. We get a 3/3 human warrior with trample. Whenever Felothar enters or attacks, we can sacrifice a non-land permanent. When we do, put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Now to start things off, our first section is called Modified, since 1/1 counters are considered modifications. With Envoy of the Ancestors, our modified creatures we control have lifelink. The Obstinate Gargoyle will have flying as long as it's modified, but we mainly included it for the persistability. Whenever it dies, it can come back with a -1/-1 counter. Now, since we're going to be passing out 1/1 counters, that's going to offset these -1/-1 counters, meaning we can sacrifice this guy and he will return himself to our board pretty regularly. As some removal pieces that care about modified creatures, we have Lethal Throwdown, Signature Slam, and a Lethal Exploit. Any deck that has green loves ramp, so we have Orochi Merge Keeper. As long as it's modified, we can tap it and it can add 2 green mana. Since I love saving money, discounts are right up my alley. The Walking Skyscraper will cost 1 less for each modified creature we control. It's an 8/8 with trample, and it has hexproof as long as it's untapped. For some recursion, we have a card that I've really grown to love, Unforgiving 1. Whenever it attacks, we can return target creature with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the field, where X is the number of modified creatures we control. And a pretty fun card for some token generation, we have one with the Kami. Now, recently I got to test run this deck list, and one card that overperformed was the Golden Tailed Trainer with that second ability. Whenever it attacks, other modified creatures we control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Golden Tail's power. So if we throw enough 1/1 counters on this guy and pump up our team, we can deal a lot of damage. Now, the added bonus to the power and toughness of our creatures from our 1/1 counters is nice, but let's add some abilities with the Duskshell Crawler granting trample. We can get First Strike from the Einok Bondkin, the Abzan Battle Priest will grant lifelink, and the Abzan Falconer will give all of our creatures with 1/1 counters flying. Another cool keyword ability is Endure, which was just released in Tarkir Dragonstorm. This brought us cards like Descendant of Storms, Fortress Kinguard, and the Sinkhole Surveyor, which actually performed a lot better than I expected. And we can't forget the Inspirited Vanguard, Anafenza Unyielding Lineage, and the Warden of the Grove. Now, our commander wants to pass out 1/1 counters, but we have included a few cards to help with that as well. With Good Fortune Unicorn, whenever another creature we control enters, we'll put a 1/1 counter on that creature. With Conclave Mentor, if one or more 1/1 counters will be put on a creature we control, it gets that many +1 additional instead. And another card that was surprisingly brutal is the Botanical Brawler. Whenever we're passing these 1/1 counters out to our entire team, for each different creature that gets a 1/1 counter, this Botanical Brawler is going to get an additional 1/1 counter as well. For a bit of protection for our board, we have Duty Beyond Death. As an additional cost to cast it, we have to sacrifice a creature, but it gives all of our creatures indestructible and puts a 1/1 counter on each of them. And another new one from Tarkir Dragonstorm is the Stalwart Successor. It's kind of the same strategy as all of these. Whenever they get counters for the first time, they get an extra 1/1 counter. And Pledge of Unity, passing out 1/1 counters and gaining us some life. Now, my favorite section is one that's called Counter Value. It's essentially cards that generate us value when they have +1/+1 counters that are put on them, or they generate value when we do things with creatures that have those 1/1 counters. A good example of this is the Elite Scale Guard. Whenever a creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it attacks, we can tap target creature defending player controls, opening them up for a ton of damage. A pretty recognizable one is the Armorcraft Judge. Whenever ETBs, we draw a card for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter. Now, we also have Rishkar Pima Renegade. I've actually run him in quite a few decks and never really gotten to utilize him as much as I did here. Whenever he enters, he puts a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Then each creature we control with a counter on it can tap to add a green mana. And another card that I feel just fits, but once again, I haven't really gotten to capitalize off of him. We have Hamza, the Ham Sandwich. He costs 1 less to cast for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter, and then it makes it so creature spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less for each creature we control that has a 1/1 counter. And pretty common in 1/1 counter decks, we have Inspiring Call. We can draw a card for each creature we control that has a 1/1 counter, then they gain indestructible until end of turn. Now, 2 cards I actually did get to use that put in a ton of work was the Herd Baloth and the Basking Broodscale. Anytime they get a 1/1 counter placed on them, they create a creature token. The Herd Baloth creating 4/4s, and the Basking Broodscale creating our Eldrazi Scions that we can sacrifice for mana. As some additional graveyard recursion, we have Evolution Witness. Whenever it gets a 1/1 counter put on it, we can return target permanent from our graveyard to our hand. Now, for some temporary removal, we have Constable of the Realm. Whenever it gets a 1/1 counter, it can exile up to 1 target non-land permanent until it leaves the battlefield. Card draw is my favorite thing, so we have Dusk Legion Duelist. Whenever it gets a counter, we can draw a card, but this only triggers once. But we have the Yathen Tomb Guard. Whenever a creature with a counter on it deals damage to our opponent, we draw a card and lose a life. And a card that I didn't get to use, but I'm actually very excited to come across in future games, is the Iridescent Horn Beetle. At the beginning of our end step, we create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each 1/1 counter we put on creatures under our control this turn. And there you have it, my friends. That was my meat and potatoes of the Felothar Dawn of the Abzan budget deck that I built and tested out. If you want to see the full deck list, check out the link in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe, tell your friends about us, and I will see you in the next one.